How many knobs are too many knobs? So when you look at a pedal and see a boatload of knobs on there, or see an amp with, you think of like Mesa Boogie Triple Rex or something like that. And then you look at something like a Dr. Z, Maz, or not the Maz, the Carmen Gia, or the Mini Z. It's got one or two knobs depending on which model you had. What's knobs that's too many?
So simplicity is really important to me because my brain is not very complicated.
You're a simple guy.
I really am. I'm simple. So like when I see the Gia, I'm like, 2 knobs. That's my type of thing. I've had some complicated equipment.
Yeah.
So I had a Bogner Alchemist. Well, still have it. And it's got 2 channels. It's got like 2 switches per channel.
Yep.
It's got a boost. It does have delay, reverb. Anyways, that almost has too much for me.
Yeah.
I would say, especially like Mesa Boogie, they have so many switches and knobs and like a full EQ on each channel.
Yeah.
And I'm like, some of that EQ you could probably share. I get clean and dirty, but like the too dirty. Anyways, I'm getting into it.
On the back panel, how many knobs and switches are there too?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so
you get through all these and you're like, oh crap, there's more on the back.
So this Marshall is simple.
Yep.
I know how to use it.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Right.
When you're looking at a Bogner Ecstasy,
yep,
that is ridiculous. You're like trying to figure out how to fly an airplane at that moment. You're like, well, as I'm dropping stuff. But as you're flipping knobs, flipping switches, like a Bogner Ecstasy has way too much going on.
Okay.
Now, I would say a Dr. Z's like, the Gia and stuff like that, that could be almost too simplistic.
Okay.
So, when I'm thinking like, what is the most I can handle? Like, I would say a Vox AC30. Like, it has a tone cut, has stuff like that. I would say that's about all you need. I like simplicity.
That's interesting to me because I think the Vox amps are like a little bit confusing with the tone cut.
They can be.
I think they can be a little bit confusing. Even more confusing than like, you look at the EVH3 amps, right? So 3 channels. Mm-hmm. You've got a separate bass, mid, and treble for each one, a separate gain and volume. And I think there's like 2 switches or 1 switch for 2 different types of style for each channel. Mm-hmm. At least it's simple.
A tone cut, brother, is really no different than like a presence knob.
Right. I get that.
It's like a backwards presence knob. So like, to me, it makes the most sense. But I will say for pedals, like I have a Wampler Terraform.
Yep.
That gives me too many options. Like, it gets to a point where I'm like, I don't even know what I want at this point.
Yeah.
So I just, honestly, whatever factory setting, and then I'll just move it a little bit here and there. And, like, I don't want to touch it after that.
Okay.
So, simple is better. Simple, few word, do trick. Okay? Few word, do trick.
Few word, do trick.
Yeah. So, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So, I can fall in 2 camps with it, I guess. So I like a very simple amp. I like the idea of the amp being pretty simple. I can deal with an EQ section that's bass, mid, and treble. It's not a big deal. Like, that's a lot of knobs. Watch out. 3 knobs.
Watch out.
And then a presence control. Okay, now we're getting a little more complicated. Now we got 4 knobs, and the presence control is not really, Now we've got a volume knob. Mm-hmm. I'm okay with all that. I think my problem comes in with multiple, like, dip switches and things.
Like a mid shift.
You get a mid shift and stuff where it's like, well, I could just turn my mids up or my mids down, for maybe cutting down the mids. Or maybe it's like a bright cap switch, and you could just turn your treble up, or you could turn your treble down. It's not, for me, I like something pretty simple. I don't mind 4 or 5 knobs per channel. But I don't want a bunch of switches. And I also don't want to be able to go in the back and change like a bunch of power tubes. Like those Mesas, you can switch from, EL34s to 6L6s to like all these different options.
My thing is with all these like mid-shift switches, most of the time you like a sound that's in between both. Every single time.
A lot of times.
Like, and you have to choose one or the other. Like, very rarely is there like a 3-position switch.
Yeah.
Like, those are the best.
Yeah.
Because you have the best of both worlds. But most of the time it's one or the other, and at that point I'm like, well, I'm not happy with either of these.
I kind of too like to sit down with an amp when I'm trying it out. Sit down, I plug it in. I turn everything noonish,
Yeah.
you know, I plug it in, start playing it, and if I don't like the sound that's coming out, I'll adjust the knob slightly, move everything to, you know, like maybe 2 o'clock.
I was about to say 1 or 2 o'clock
or maybe like 10 o'clock, depending on if I'm boosting or cutting. And within like 3 minutes, if somewhere in that little time period I can't find a sound that I'm happy with, I unplug it and turn it off.
Yeah, you're not inspired.
I'm just uninterested, and it's either A, too complicated and too many knobs and switches that I can find, you know, or it's just not the right amp for me. When it comes to pedals, drive pedals that have more than 3 knobs, I'm not super interested in.
Okay, if there's a 3-band EQ on an overdrive, and then
Yeah.
you got a gain and a volume, to me that makes sense.
It makes sense, but I don't want it. It makes complete sense, but I don't want it. You know, I've got a Snouse black box, and it's got bass, mid, and treble.
Oh, goodness.
It's the Pro. It's got 4 switches on the bottom of it.
That's a headache.
And then it's got a presence control.
It sounds great, but it's a headache.
And then it's got a preamp control. I think that's what it is. Preamp and presence. And it is so much. So whenever I go to plug it in now, anytime I've plugged it in, there's a switch you can flip, which turns it into like whatever, Mach 1 mode or Mark 1 mode. And all that will work is the volume, the tone, and the gain.
That's all you need.
That's all that works.
Yep.
And that's all I want. Whenever you start getting into 3-band EQs, and then you're pushing that 3-band EQ in an overdrive pedal into an amp, it starts getting more complicated than what I want.
Well, I would say that that's right most of the time, but then you have something like Wampler releases that Clarksdale. It's a tube screamer with a 3-band EQ, and guess what? That thing's amazing.
Yeah.
A tube screamer with 3-band EQ. I mean, that's
genius.
pretty awesome.
I would throw my hat in the ring, and I would say I want that pedal, not with a 3-band. I just want to add a mid knob.
Okay.
I want to be able to turn up or down the mids, or maybe 2 knobs. One kind of like they do with the acoustic preamp stuff, where you can sweep the mids, so your mid frequency's moving, and then once you find the frequency you like, you can boost it or you can cut it. I kind of like the idea of that even better.
Right.
Rather than having, because the Clarksdale does sound great,
right,
and it's awesome to have the 3-band EQ.
It's not enough, or it's not too many knobs.
It doesn't feel like just another tube screamer to me whatsoever. But to me, when I look at it, I'm like, well, I wish it just didn't have quite so many knobs.
Right.
You know? So for me, I can deal with a few more knobs on an amp than what I can a pedal. But I need it pretty simple. It needs to be pretty straightforward for me.
You have to be inspired quickly.
Got to be inspired quickly and got to be able to find, even if there's a lot of knobs, it's just got to hit me fast. Like, I like this immediately with everything kind of like all the weird switches off and everything. I can slowly tinker with it. But all the amps I love are simple.
Right.
All the amps I absolutely love are pretty simple amps.
A great sound right out of the box.
Yep.
That's what I like.
Yep, me too. All right.